Grace to you and peace from Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. Please be seated. Yeah, there's going to be a few passages like that over the course of the summer. The prophets did not hold back when they were angry. And we're going to hear a little bit about why he was so angry and what they were doing to make God and Amos angry. Because despite his protests to the contrary, Amos was very much a prophet. And although Bible scholars place him among the minor prophets, he has had major impact on our tradition, and his words, still read and preached today, are very much alive. But Bible scholars have to find a better name than minor prophets when describing these books. These 12 prophets are called minor because their books are shorter than the three major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. These scholars who seem to think that size matters forget that small can be mighty. But Amos wasn't trained as a prophet, and so he didn't follow any prophetic tradition. As they said, he was a sheep herder, and he farmed sycamore trees. And like a lot of folks of his time, he was doing quite well for himself. But when he looked out over at his neighbors, and he noticed the shady dealings of King Jeroboam II, not to mention the corruption he observed in the northern kingdom from his cozy perch in the south, he saw a picture of his people that made his blood rage. But by all appearances, life was good in Israel. Israel was very wealthy under Jeroboam II, and Jeroboam wanted to keep it that way. Jeroboam knew that strength meant security, and security meant peace. Israel's military protected them against those enemies who might want to take what they have. And Israel relied on a strong army to maintain their lifestyle. But when Amos looked out at his people, he didn't see the good life. He saw something completely different. God opened Amos's eyes to those who were, as he says, at ease in Zion. Amos sees a vision. This is the second of 5 visions that God gives to him. And Amos says, "This is what he showed me. The Lord was standing beside a wall built with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord said to me, 'Amos, what do you see?' And I said, 'A plumb line.' Then the Lord said, 'See, I am setting a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. I will never again pass them by. The high places of Isaac shall be made desolate. The sanctuaries of Israel will be laid waste, and I will rise against the house of Jeroboam with the sword.'" God is furious at Jeroboam. And people are probably looking at each other wondering why. They were living through the longest period of economic expansion and the longest peacetime that they had seen in generations. Why was Israel going to be destroyed for building a strong economy? And why was Jeroboam being punished for his success? It made no sense. So people were probably asking, "Hey, Amos, what's your problem? Things are going great. Why are you so angry? What's you ranting about? Can't you just enjoy the fruits of this great life that we've built and created for ourselves?" But success hadn't only gone to their heads. It traveled down into their hearts, hardening them to the suffering of others. Their faith became just something you did. It no longer defined who you were. Worship was just, routine prayers here and there, and obligatory sacrifices. The festivals weren't celebrations of what God had done for them. They were celebrations of themselves and how great they were. They assumed that because they were so rich and living in relatively peaceful times, that this was evidence of a special divine blessing. Peace and prosperity made them better than others, they felt. This blessing meant that they were superior. And that's what made them dangerous. Affluence, their kind of affluence, had overtaken them like a sickness. They became soft, comfortable, at ease with themselves. They luxuriated in excess, and the massive gap between the rich and the poor was causing social instability. They had lost their sense of groundedness. Their identity was in their wealth and in their strength, rather than in the traditions and the teachings of their faith. Gone was the compassion that they had been known for. Gone was the wisdom that guided them through their history. Gone was the faithfulness to the God who set them free. And all they cared about was the money, the wealth, and they created stores of it by unscrupulous means. The wealthy manipulated credit, then stole the land from their poorer neighbors. That created this massive wealth gap. And when the poor protested, the wealthy crushed their opposition with the use of the military. If people were poor, then they were clearly outside of God's blessing. They were just getting what's coming to them. Poor people must have sinned in ways wealthy people did not, or else why would they be living in poverty, right? Isn't that how it works? So they ignored the cries of the poor. If their wealth was a sign of God's blessing, if they were doing well financially, then God must have been pleased with them. But what they didn't realize was that they had forgotten who they were. They had misunderstood the meaning of blessing. They may have gained the whole world, but they had lost their soul. So God showed Amos a plumb line. The plumb line represents that God will correct what is crooked and will straighten Israel and put God's people back on the right path. The plumb line would redirect their center of gravity, regrounding them in the faith, placing their traditions and their teachings and their God back into the core of who they were. But it's not surprising that Jeroboam wants to kill Amos. The priest Amaziah tattletales on Amos to the king, and Amos, he says, has some harsh words for Jeroboam. And no one really wants to hear that kind of talk, especially when things are going so well. So Amaziah tells Amos, go somewhere else. Go away with that kind of talk. People just don't want to hear it. There will be consequences if you don't shut your mouth. Amos doesn't listen. He jacks things up. He says this, now therefore hear the word of the Lord. You say, do not prophesy against Israel, and do not preach against the house of Isaac. Therefore, thus says the Lord, your wife shall become a prostitute in the city. Your sons and your daughters shall fall by the sword. Your land shall be parceled out by line, and you yourself shall die in an unclean land. And Israel shall surely go into exile, away from its land. Harsh words. Some might say a little unhinged. The rantings of a religious nut who's just looking for attention. And that was probably true. He was looking for attention, the king's attention, and he got it. He had to call attention to the disease that was eating away at the nation's soul, the disease of a meaningless affluence, the disease of constructing a world that for someone to win, someone else had to lose, the disease of using violence to protect what's yours, the disease of not caring for the least among them. But throughout this book, the question that Amos seems to be asking is, what is the goal of your prosperity if achieving it means drifting further and further away from your divine purpose? And I think that's a question that we can ask ourselves today. Because often I worry that we have defined success in economic terms, when success can be so much larger, so much more expansive a concept. I'm going to bug you again with my doctoral research on the spirituality of money. I'm going to warn you, this is going to go on for at least the next year. Because the Bible talks a lot about money. And I've shared with you before that the Bible doesn't talk negatively about wealth or money. It talks negatively about the misuse of wealth and money. Many people note that money doesn't make you a better person or a worse person. Money, like power, brings out more of who you are. If you're already generous, then you'll be more generous when you gain wealth. If you're greedy, you become more greedy as you accumulate greater cash flows. Also, many people who are the least happy in our society are those who make money just to make money. They lack any purpose beyond growing their assets, Financial decisions then aren't just about numbers, but it's about morality. If they end their day lower on their ledger than when they started their day, they feel like they've not only failed professionally, but they have failed as a human being. And then they project that morality onto others. If someone has less money than them, then that person is a lesser human being for not living up to their sense of financial morality. But also, the other side is true. If someone has more money than them, then they feel diminished. Like the person with more money not only has more, but is more. And that's the money script, it's called, that this person lives by. The money story that is told that guides their relationship to money, and therefore their relationship to others. And such a money story can be spiritually toxic. Putting a numeric value on a person's worth isn't what God intends. When that kind of financial morality is turned outward, it creates division, animosity, jealousy, and cruelty. And when it's turned inward, it creates shame and a diminished sense of one's worth as a human being. You know, my research has shown that shame is the common experience people have in their relationship to money. I think for the vast majority, shame is the dominant experience people have when they relate to money. One study showed that many people who don't have money or aren't good with money is because they subconsciously don't believe that they deserve it. If they have money in their pocket or their bank account, they have to get rid of it. It doesn't belong to them. They're not worthy to be in possession of money, so they spend it. They overspend in order to get it out of their lives. And for others, they overspend because they feel that money's dirty. They've heard all their lives that money is the root of all evil, so to have money is to be in possession of evil. So they rid themselves of the evil money, feeling shame at being both in possession of money and at spending it. And others have a cognitive dissonance when it comes to money. They've been told since they were children that, money doesn't grow on trees. You've heard that, right? And so when they make money or they receive it, they feel it shouldn't come so easily. If money is supposed to be scarce, if it doesn't grow on trees, then why is it in my hand? So like a hungry wolf who just found a dead deer, they feast by spending their money because they don't know when they will receive it again, like the wolf doesn't know when he'll find the next dead deer. Everyone has a money script, a story we tell ourselves about what money means in our lives. However, some of my colleagues hate it when I say this, but it's kind of the point of my whole research, but it's that money itself can have transformative power, both positive and negative, when its energy is purposefully directed. A purposefully directed money power asks these questions. The money is asking this: what are you building? What are you creating? Who are you becoming? Who has access to prosperity? And who gets left behind? And why? And what can you do about that? Is money serving the world? Are you serving the world through money? Or are you serving yourself? Is it drawing you closer to each other? Is it putting walls between each other? Are your relationships deepening? Are you becoming more fully into who God created you to be? For the Israel to which Amos preached, money served the self. They were becoming less who God created them to be. And Amos's prophecy wasn't so much about God punishing them for idolatry and lack of faithfulness, but the destruction of Israel would be its society collapsing under the weight of its financial gluttony. They stopped being a caring, compassionate people who provided for the poor, the orphan, the widow. And the attempt to protect their way of life, seeds of division would be sown. The illusion of security would be exposed, and their society would fall, not by a wave of God's hand, but through the consequences of losing what grounded them. Amos's vision wasn't just a condemnation of Israel's excess. He wanted Israel to remember who they were. He knew that they were better than how they were behaving. He knew that their soul, well damaged, was capable of being healed, and they could be that healing force once again. I think us as a church, we can be Amos. When our society defines human worth by financial terms, when we are tempted to define success by how much money people make, when we fail to provide for the least among us, we can remind our community who we are, a caring, compassionate people. I'm thinking specifically in our tax clinic work. Our team is actively looking for ways to help our clients to lift themselves out of financial situations, not just by doing their taxes. We're looking beyond that now. We're starting to ask our clients these kinds of questions. What kind of life do you want to live? And how can we get you to that life? And of course, managing money is a big part of that process. But also we ask, who do you want to become? What do you want to contribute to our community? What problem do you want to solve? And underneath all those questions is the fundamental question. How can we help you become who God has created you to be using your financial resources? I think we can be a plumb line that helps straighten people's lives, and they can be the plumb line that straightens our lives, helping us to see where our lives have a jagged edge, where we need to be straightened out and learn from. So that together, all of us, we can grow into who God created us to be. Our community will remember who we are, and we, everyone, can build and rebuild the world that was created in love. And may this be so among us. Amen.